Welcome. Hello. Welcome to our 12th episode of Spirit of the Time. We are so excited to have the legendary Bob Ward with us today. We will get started in 3 minutes. Thank you again for spending your Friday afternoon with us. We will get started with our 12th Spirit of the Time episode in just a few minutes. We have passenger Bob Ward today. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today on this Friday. And we will get started in just about 2 minutes. We are going to do a quick Q&A, off the record Q&A, after our 1-hour presentation. So please stay with us if you'd like to hear all that.
A golf course.
No.
Welcome to our Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. So excited to have everyone today. We will get started in just about 1 minute. All right. Welcome, everyone. We will get started momentarily. Welcome to our 12th episode of Spirit of the Time. So excited to have everybody here today. We are going to get started in just a second. All right. All right. And welcome to Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director. The time travel is the ultimate experience. In fact, it's probably the most immersive and interactive attraction ever imagined. Here in the Zeitgeist Creative Studio, aka R&J's Time Travel Emporium, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where experiential entertainment vets Ryan Harmon and Joe Lancicero study the past and spin the present envisioning the future of UXIRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. And each month, we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and accomplished colleague aboard our time machine. We journey through that person's career, unraveling the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely, yet timeless. And because we're live, you can type in any questions into the chat box and our passenger will answer them after the hour in an unrecorded and off-the-record Q&A. So climbing aboard our time machine today is 50-year industry veteran, TEA Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, and co-founder of Universal Creative, Bob Ward. A native Floridian who is an accomplished designer, master planner, and strategic planner, Bob was there in the early 1980s when the legendary Jay Stein convinced the last Hollywood mogul, Lou Wasserman, to expand the Universal Studios tour into a full-fledged theme park, and then reinvent the experience in Florida and again in Japan. It's now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer, Ryan Harmon, and Zeitgeist Executive Vice President and Chief Art Director, Joe Lancicero, along with the man who designed the earthquake dam break on cocktail napkins, Bob Ward. Yeah.
Hey,
Whoa,
we're back. We're back.
Here we are.
Konnichiwa.
That's because we just returned from 1983. On this day, Tokyo Disneyland opened.
Yep.
Started, but
And it was cool to see it on the first day.
Yeah, wow.
But you know, the castle, it's kind of like the Florida one. I don't know.
I know, but I mean, so much time has passed since then, and that was created the beginning of an industry there. But talk about starting the creation of an industry. We
Yeah.
have the man, literally a pioneer.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like today I've never worked with Bob, but
Yeah.
long been an admirer of him and what he's done. But I mean, this is like talking to the Wright brothers,
I
and
know.
talking to
I know.
Edison. I mean, he created an industry.
Yes.
He created the movie theme park
Yes,
industry.
yes. Ride the
So,
movies.
Wow.
Yes.
So we got a lot to talk about with this man. and
Yes,
a
welcome,
lot-
Bob.
50 years. Wow. So let's get going. Where
Let's
are we
get
on the
going,
time
Bob.
machine?
Let's set the time machine. We're going to go back to the 1950s right now, and we see you sitting in front of the TV with your little cowboy hat, watching Roy Rogers. What is going on here?
Well, and I was watching on a black and white TV.
Yeah.
Well, you know, life was simpler then. And I grew up watching The Lone Ranger and Roy Rogers and Gene Autry and Fighting Bob Steele. And, you know, a fella came around the neighborhood with a horse and a camera, and you could dress up in your gear and have your photo taken. And, you know, that was the first, what do you want to be? I want to be a cowboy. You know, and it stuck with me. I'm still riding today. So
That's so awesome.
it was an adventure.
Well, that's cool. That was your first theme, right?
Yeah, there you go.
So did you start off, wanting to be a designer right away, an artist? And, I know if we move a few years forward, you're winning a contest over here at the Tri-County Fair, first place. Like what's happening here?
Well, both my parents were auto workers. I was adopted, and they really have molded me into who I've become. No question. They gave me the tools to become who I've become. But my dad was done with the winter and decided to move to Florida. So we moved to Clearwater Beach in 1954. And at that time, I was going up in elementary, junior high, and high school, and I took up art and drawing. And back then, the next job I wanted to be was a car stylist, because that was really cool back then,
Right.
And I also wanted to be like my dad, who was an engineer, but I wasn't so great at math. So that was not as likely. And so I actually entered an oil painting in the Tri-County Fair and did win a first place prize that was a series of lessons with a very world-renowned artist living in the area, Robbie Robinson. And so at that time, I was, 17, maybe 16, 17. And the average age in the class was at least 60.
Whoa.
And so between the class and Robbie himself, who was quite a philosopher, he sort of became my first mentor of sorts, and certainly worldly philosopher, because he had sailed the world.
Right.
So that got me kind of cranked up on that. And I was fortunate that I was able to graduate and go to Florida State on a track scholarship. And
Wow.
I started a art and design program. Was fortunate to go to Florence, Italy and participate in it there. And so painting, drawing, and then photography happened. When I went to Italy, I started being a photographer, and I became passionate about photography, and I thought, now this is what I want to do, so it's sort of like a roulette wheel. Where is it going to stop this time? And
Now, is it true? Is it true around this time you wanted to, or you joined the Marines and you wanted to go
in college, in the late 60s, there was a draft, and yes, you had to be in ROTC in those days. And the Marine and Navy recruiter came on board with an officer school program where you do summer camps and not have to do things during the school year, like cut your hair. And I figured if I was going to go to Vietnam, I better go well prepared. So I joined the Marine Corps. And in my first boot camp, I was injured and not physically qualified for combat. So I have my, I graduated, and so that stopped my track career. I'll be really focusing on art. That's how I got to go to Florence. Photography happened, jumped forward. Fraternity brother was in the still department at Disney in Burbank, and we had stayed in touch, and he said, I think you have a great portfolio of work. Come on out, and we have some openings coming up. You ought to interview here. And that sounded like, what could be better than that? And so I did that, and I had my first introduction to, well, we love you. We think everything's great. We'd like to hire you, but the budget opening doesn't come up for another 6 months. You're a little early. And you know how we are when you're right out of school. I got things to do, places to go, and all that stuff. And they said, wait. Why don't you, we see you're in Florida. Why don't you interview at Walt Disney World with WED? And should you get hired, we can just laterally transfer you and make it really easy. So I did that. And fortunately was hired in Pico, Project Installations Coordinating Office, with a small group. WED at the time was maybe no more than 500 people. There were no computers, there were no cell phones, there were no all that stuff. So I was given a hard hat and a walkie-talkie, and they assigned me to Liberty Square. You're in charge of FF&E in Liberty Square. And I go, great, what's FF&E? Furniture, fixtures, and equipment, who knew? And they said, if you're in trouble, use the walkie-talkie. And at that time, of course, still under, this was 70, so I was there for a good year plus before opening. I met, Colin Campbell and Jurger and Bob Jolly and all kinds of awesome original guys that were in the field. And they were totally about sharing and being enthusiastic about, your enthusiasm. So that was wonderful. And then I was assigned to Howard Rowland, who was head of purchasing, and I was in charge of the installation of furnishings in both hotels. And that was another eye-opening experience. And as you know, we had a lot of ups and downs, but on opening day, early in the morning at the Polynesian Hotel, we're all out there laying sod in front of the hotel because, it was still getting finished. That's where the press event was. And lo and behold, here comes Card Walker and a few of the other guys walking over and getting down there with us. And green side up card, you know. It's,
Wow.
all this was rolling on before the whole press thing happened. And Scollard Moss was the interior designer of the Contemporary Hotel, and we'd gotten to be friends. And so fortunately, we ended up palling around that day. So when we went to the Magic Kingdom later that morning, rode the monorail over and stood in the station watching people get off the monorail, off the boats, headed for the train station. And it was obvious that they went through that train station like the proscenium of a stage. And when they came out the other side, they were there. They had left all the cares behind. They have everyone they love with them, and life couldn't be better, you know. And that was a magical. I'd never been to Disneyland. I never knew what that experience would be like. But that was probably the cornerstone moment and what got me started in the direction I ended up going in. So I was. That was really a big deal moment. And I was fortunate to be in Pico because I had access to everything, even though I wasn't doing the show ride installation, our team was. And I sort of grew up with, full immersion, you might say. And then maybe a year or less after we opened, my pal, many of you know, John Robert O'Drury, was putting up graphics and signage and print and all of that. Awesome guy, awesome designer. And he's come and gone from WED a couple of times, and he was ready to head back to Northern California, and he was departing, and I ended up taking his role in graphics and signage and print. Menus for the hotels, all the site-wide, road signs, everything. But what was cool about the parks were you're involved in all the meetings with operations, with merchandise, with retail. And so I would just stay and sort of audit the conversation the next few hours. And I started to learn all about the dynamics of operations and retail and all of that stuff and the personalities. And it was a great learning curve. And I also got to come out to WED several times in Glendale and on Flower Street. Ernie Prince-Horn was my boss. He was in LA, and got to meet guys there. And one visit, of course, he always walked in past the grand old men on the front, I shouldn't say old men.
The gold
on the front row, Al Bartino and all the guys. And it was just mesmerizing, and they were creating the story, the magic, and I fell in love with that too. And Chuck Mile, who was really probably the next mentor in my life, popped up, and we had developed a friendship. We'd go to lunch and everything, and I was saying, Chuck, I'm really impressed with the guys creating the attractions and what I've seen at WED. And I could be interested in that. After all, that's really more my background than construction and things. And he said, well, you've got a ways to go, but something I would share with you, you should think about is those guys are truly the brilliance behind getting the story going, setting the tone and pace. But then it's handed off to a development team, a design team to elaborate on that, and then an entire team to deliver it. And along the way, lots of decisions get made, and it's not always the same concept that you started with exactly. And he said, and that's just fine. But just realize, that's a piece. And he said, given your Pico background and what you're doing now, you may want to think about perhaps a different role that would allow you to be more of a senior executive creatively, where you have a lot more influence over the delivery. And, I'm not sure I knew for sure what he was talking about at the time, but sort of. But I'd have to say that was a really key thing. And Barry Upson had a similar conversation with me after I started at Universal. So those two were really key in causing me to embrace the idea that you can't create everything and still be the guy responsible for delivering it all. Those are two different things. And I liked the big idea, so I started pointing myself in that way.
Yeah.
Wow.
So here in 1973, it looks like you're leaving Disney, and the great Rolly Crumb and Fred Brooks are hiring you away to join the circus, basically.
Irving and Kenneth Feld had done a deal with Mattel as an investor to back them in creating a Circus World theme park in Haines City, Florida.
Wow.
And they hired Fred Brooks, who was Dick Nunes's number 2 guy, and they hired Rolly Crump. And I'd gotten to know Rolly because of, being in the park and everything, and we had hit it off. And I had no idea. He approached me one day and said, "Bob, I'm going with Fred. We got this great opportunity. Would you like to come along as my assistant art director with me?" And I was going, who would not want to do that with Rolly?
Right.
And so Rolly was my next amazing person in my life that I learned so much from. We created a preview center that had one of the first IMAX films in it that was awesome.
Wow.
Because of, you can imagine all of the things in the Big Top Circus playing out on an IMAX screen was pretty profound.
Yeah.
And we had a small little petting zoo, and we had camel rides and elephants and all that. It was a preview center. But in the mid-70s, we had an economic downturn. Everything got put on hold. Mattel didn't want to go forward. And so, I was out on my own. I started my first little design studio called Main Street Design.
Right.
And interestingly, the East Coast had not ever seen much of Disneyland, and they hadn't seen much of theming, everything. But mall developers or developers of commercial facilities were starting to think about malls. And then when Walt Disney World opened, they saw how people reacted to all the theming. And if you had a resume, even if you were not a significant contributor, if you had experience at Disney, they were hiring you to help create stuff. And so I ended up working for like a number of mall developers on theming their projects. And the other thing during that time I'm kind of really proud of is a group of us, of which John Drew is a part, and John Pugh and Tom Reidenbach, no longer with us. We created a concept called Huckleberry Junction because we believed that, the ticket opening day at Disney in '71 was $9.95.
Wow.
Along with where it is today. And even back then we were going, people in other parts of the country will never have a theme park. There's no reason they couldn't have quality entertainment close to home. So can't we design something of a Disney quality in a department store box?
Yeah.
And we called it Huckleberry Junction, and had rides and attractions and F&B and all of that, all packaged, heavily themed experience. Didn't end up going anywhere, but I'd like to, I could argue strongly that that was really before the location-based entertainment industry started. That was kind of one of the first ideas that never saw light of day.
That's an FEC concept.
So kicked around doing that, but I was always living off cash flow, and we all know how that is. And got to the point where I was mowing lawns to help supplement the parking in my car. I was married at the time, and I'm hearing, you got to get a real job and stop dreaming about this stuff. And so I go, okay, I need more experience. So I put a portfolio together and literally went to LA knocking on doors. I got an intro, I forgot from whom, to Warner Brothers. At the time, they were developing Atari, Malibu Grand Prix, other kind of family destinations. Went in and saw Randy Bright at WED. At that time, there didn't seem to be something for me there. And Tom Reidenbach's dad used to be the head of publicity for Paramount, and he called Herb Steinberg at Universal to get me an interview, and Lou Wasserman's publicist. So
Wow.
I get in to see Herb, and I'm there about 10, 15 minutes, and really great guy, the consummate publicist. And he goes, "You shouldn't be talking to me. You should be talking to Barry Upson." And I said, "Okay, great." He said, "Well, Barry just came back about 2 days ago. He was the original general manager of the studio tour in 1964.
Oh, wow.
He was an architect and had been
Yeah, the old
working on the Vancouver World's Fair as an architect and planner and creating it. And
Wow.
Jay hired him to head up the tour and organize it. Later, he left and started his own practice again, and actually was the planner for the wild animal park portion of the San Diego Zoo.
Oh, wow.
And so Jay had hired him back, little did I know at the time, to start thinking about a bigger idea. So Barry's in a bungalow. I go to see Barry. He's cleaning out the desk still of the office he's got. But we hit it off. He loved my portfolio. He's an incredible guy. And as many of you know, unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but a big, big guy. And especially when he had a satin LA Dodgers blue jacket on. I mean, it was hard to miss him. And he said, we're not in a theme park. We got a little studio tour. It's sort of like going to a General Motors plant, and we're not Disney. But you never can tell, and let's stay in touch. So of course I was good about following up, and I would email was not so big of a thing there. You call, and got to know his assistant Darcy really well. And once out of every half a dozen calls, I might get him for 15 minutes, which was great. One of my pals, John Pugh, I met at WED, was working as the head of design at Knott's Berry Farm. And he asked me out to assist him on a few things. And that's where I met another mutual friend of so many of us, Eddie Sada.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
John, that's where he started at Knott's Berry Farm. And I feel like we all have so many similar beginnings. So that time I got to see Barry a couple of times. So I come back to Orlando, and I all of a sudden I heard something about Universal opening an office in Winter Park, but it was really kind of secret. And it was just gossip in the business community.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden one day on the morning news, here's Lou Wasserman, Sid Sheinberg, Jay Stein, Barry Upson announcing that Universal Studios is coming to Orlando, Florida. And so prior to that, I skipped the fact that I did some reconnaissance and I found out where this office was. So I hustled down to the office, and I'm sitting in the reception area. It had two offices, a conference room, reception area. When the door opens hours later, in come the boys. Barry's the last one through. I really didn't know anybody else. And he said, "Bob, what are you doing here?"
You stalker.
Well, this is an exciting announcement, Barry. I mean, this is really exciting. I was hoping I might get to talk with you about it. He said, "Let's have a drink end of the day." So we do that. And he said, we're not wed, and we don't have all of that going on. There's like 5 or 6 of us right now. and we're way over our heads. So I think you'd be great to help. I'd like to try you out consulting, developing an attraction. But I have to tell you that our CEO or president at the time, Jay Stein, is not only the president, but he considers himself the chief creative officer. And lots of people we've tried to work with have found that very difficult. And so he's pretty forceful in what he thinks it should be, even though he's asking you to create it. And I said, let's go for it. So he said, "Okay, we'll bring it." So this was the summertime of 1980. And
Wow, so Epcot hadn't even opened yet.
No.
Yeah, I didn't even know
Well, it was being built. And that was one of the things that Jay used to leverage Lou and Sid about finally coming, because he said, look, you thought Disney might fail. They didn't. Now they're building a
Right.
second park. I mean,
Right.
hello.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All big picture.
so I come out to LA, go up to the top of the Black Tower, meet Jay with Barry, and he goes, I have this idea. It's a sound effects theater. Nobody knows what a Foley stage is, or how all of the sound effects are really done for film and television. And I think we've got this screen test theater show. I think this could be a different version of that, where we get guests to become Foley stage people, against a script that we pre-recorded, and they've got to do all the sound effects with all the different stuff these guys use. And they're gonna fail miserably. It's gonna be a crack up. The audience is gonna be roaring. It's gonna be great. I'm going to the Amalfi Coast for 2 weeks, and I'd like to see it when I get back. That was my first Jay Stein encounter.
Nice.
So they signed me so they put me in Terry Winnick's good hands. Many of you may recall Terry, also no longer with us, unfortunately. And he was really the lead attraction and design guy at the tour. They had Richard Crane, who was the construction guy, and they had Barry, and they had Terry. And we're talking lean and mean organization here.
Yeah.
So Terry hooked me up with a writer, Tom Kelsey, great guy. And I'd never done anything like this before. And so then took me over, got us introduced on the Foley stage with all those guys. And so Tom and I set about, developing a story. And while he's developing the story, I'm sketching, and that led to kind of storyboarding the story as it evolved into a pretty decent storyboard. And at the same time, it just seemed, I didn't think that you wouldn't do this, that you'd also develop an idea for the theater. What's the size of it? How many seats? What's it look like? So I developed the theater facade and building and sections and everything else, and showed where all this stuff would be going on. So I had all that along with the script and the storyboards. So Jay comes back, we come upstairs, and this is say, Tom Kelsey, the writer, had been in front of Jay several times before with Terry Winnick, and he had already prepped me at how brutal it could be. And he said, don't get freaked out. He's going to interrupt a lot. That's what he does. And I said, okay. So he starts reading the script. I'm flipping through storyboards and acting things out, and all of that stuff. And I'm just waiting for him to say something. And we got through the entire pitch without him saying anything. And I think we were all stunned. Terry was stunned. I was stunned. Terry was stunned. We're going, and Jay goes, this has never happened before, because I'm often asking questions a lot. He said, but frankly, I was a bit overwhelmed by how complete of an idea this was. It's not just a script. It's not just a storyboard. You've got the whole attraction set up here. I've never seen that before. And he said, but I do have a lot of input. And so it was great. We developed that for the park. At the time, Universal was thinking it would be a souped up version of the Hollywood tour, with a bigger tour center, with a backlot tour, and studios beside it. And so this was going to be one of the tour center attractions. They then tried me out on Earthquake Gambling, because they had done the Earthquake movie. And I developed that after I was already there.
You moved to LA, right?
I moved to LA in January of '81. And because Barry called me in November, I guess it was, after I'd gone home, and said, in speaking with Jay, we'd like to invite you to become the director of design of the project.
Wow. That's awesome.
And this is all above my head,
Right.
But it was above everybody's head. We weren't wed. They were doing tram experiences, so
Right.
it was a bit like the Wright Brothers.
So we're here in 19, is that you up in Laurel Canyon strumming an acoustic guitar?
Yeah, I had John Mayall was when I moved out, I lived in Laurel Canyon up off Kirkwood, and I had a number of celebrity neighbors, John Mayall being one of them.
Wow.
And Laurel Canyon was like, first coming to California and everything else. I mean, it was amazing.
Oh yeah.
So we, unfortunately, another dive in the economy happened, and I guess maybe 83 or somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
And our effort got put on hold. The other thing that happened was Jay didn't want to have Lou and Sid interrupt his creation. So he wasn't updating them that frequently. So we came to the time when the big presentation was happening. And shortly after it started, the wheels came off, because it started with, you have not kept us in this loop.
Oh.
And whether we like it or not, we're not happy.
Oh.
So that happened about the same time the economy died. So everything went on hold.
Yeah.
Now we're not going to do this alone. So we're looking for partners. And so we did that. Lots of stories. I don't want to bore you with all of those, but one big one was in that shopping, we went to Paramount and pitched Frank Wells and Michael Eisner to be our partners, and they declined at the time. But we also pitched the Teamsters, the Hallmark Card Group,
Wow.
all kinds of different people, and never went anywhere. Ultimately, Garth Drabinsky, who was the chairman of Cineplex Odeon, which Universal owned a piece, and we were about to build a theater on our property, came to a earthquake dam break concept presentation I was giving, and went crazy in the room about like this is great. We got to do more disaster films, make attractions after them. He got all excited, and about 10 days later, we learned that we're negotiating with him to be our joint venture partner for Florida. And they were going to be a huge investor, and we were off and running. And that all kind of came out of that, another one of those magical moments that happened. But what also happened in that time was Barry and I were looking at ways to reduce the cost of having trams. The thought occurred to us that, Magic Kingdom, Epcot are so superior to anything we're thinking about with a souped up tram tour. The attractions and the stories are just not going to be competitive. And probably more importantly, Florida doesn't have the heritage and legacy of Universal. And that's where people did walk around. So in '84, Pope John flew in by helicopter to break bread with Lou Wasserman. I mean, that's the kind of full Lou Wasserman. And so I started sketching and scheming up some thoughts about what could be different. And I'd been hanging out in the back lot, watching the trams and watching people wishing they could do what I was doing. And so we developed the idea of a front lot, back lot, something that was more exactly what we ended up building with our first park. We pushed the envelope on attractions. We truly wanted to ride the movies. We were truly looking at teens and young adults primarily. It wasn't such a broad spectrum family target. So it was action, And as you all know, we had a rough start, but got that fixed, and that we were off to the races.
Wow.
I often think back, it's like Epcot. I mean, they put it in historical context, how big the strokes were that you guys did. You think about Kong and you think about Jaws. Those attractions were so cutting edge. I still think about Kong, getting on that ride vehicle and having Kong reach out and actually.
Well, we did the one in LA, and we knew we needed to soup it up, which was really where it all started. But we don't have time for that. But in doing this one, Peter Alexander had come on board along with Molly Rose and others by this time. And Peter started taking up, along with Terry, developing attractions. Peter, Barry Upson, and I went to lunch one day at Reeve Gauche and in Sherman Oaks, and we're talking about King Kong, and we've got to get up close. We got to be in Kong's face, not like at the bridge in LA, but we got to see him from afar, and we got to have an establishing shot. And all out of that conversation involved the Roosevelt Island Tramway in New York. That's it. We'll put guests on that. They're going to take off to go to the island, and lo and behold, Kong is on the loose everywhere. He's now on the bridge. We're approaching the bridge. We see him on the bridge. He's swatting at helicopters. We're getting closer and closer. Oh my God, they're opening fire on him. We're going to die. We're surely going to die. And, you manage to escape. And this is the Hollywood stuff right here. This is kind of where it started. So that was 1985. That's the old. That's the Hollywood version. But we don't have the Orlando version in our stuff. So then we go, whoa, what if you escape? But that's not really it. I don't remember if that was Jay or Peter or where that came, but wouldn't it be something if you thought that was it, but it wasn't really it? And you come around the corner and oh my God, there he is. And now he's going to reach out and grab you and look at you and throw you down, And so I storyboarded. Back then we all did everything. So I did the early concept work on Kong and E.T. and Jaws and wow. A lot of stuff. Anyway, so yeah.
So was it around this time you guys brought in some people we know today, like Phil Hedema, Mark Woodbury?
Well, Phil joined us in LA as we were starting to, in the 80s, really get going with Florida. And we were starting to develop attractions in Hollywood. The first one was Conan the Barbarian. That was the first time the company had ever spent more than $1 million on anything, and it was like $4 million.
That was a great show.
We were big folks back then. And the next thing we did was the A-Team stunt show. And ultimately that transformed into Miami Vice, and Phil came on and led that whole thing in the early stages. Okay. He ended up joining the Florida team later on, but while we were getting started on that, we needed somebody focusing on Hollywood. And so we focused on attractions in Hollywood initially.
Okay.
But yes, more people started coming on board, but nothing like what anybody else had.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So 1987, you're now giving up your beautiful home in Laurel Canyon and going back to Florida, it looks like. And I think Disney is announcing that they want to do their own studio tour.
Well, yeah. It's interesting you bring that up. Lo and behold, in 1988 into 89, I guess it was 88, Disney announces the Disney MGM studio tour.
And that was my first project.
Then they and Bob Weiss was on that too.
Yeah.
And we so anyway, interestingly, the imagery that started coming out of it, we felt at Universal had a lot of similarities to the things we had showed them on our first presentation to them at Paramount. And so it became a real big issue with Jay Stein and Michael Eisner throwing daggers back and forth. George Lucas is trying to restrain Eisner, and Stevens trying to restrain Jay. And meanwhile, Sid Sheinberg in Times says Disney is a ravenous rat and they can't own Florida. It was a wild
ravenous rat.
Anyway, as it turned out, we had changed gears and we weren't doing most of those things anymore anyway. But nevertheless, it was a touch point.
Yeah. Okay. And tell us about the day you that the park opened and you were on the Jaws ride. with the other executives.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, things were tough at opening, and I happened to be on the Jaws boat that Sid and his wife and several other execs were on, along with guests, and we got stuck in the lagoon. And it took too long for staff to get a rowboat to come out and get us. And meanwhile, you all have heard the stories about, the very expressive executive management at MCA and Universal. Well, they were very expressive on the boat while they were waiting to get on. Very expressive. And and then the big press event where everybody gets to ask questions happened in Animal Actors, and we're all up there. Peter's in the trenches trying to wrench on attractions, and so he wasn't there. And Stephen J. Luce had buried the whole game. And of course, the press keeps throwing questions at Stephen, and he goes, "Bob will take that one." And so I'm tap dancing and everything, and I one thing that just flashed in my mind, I think I sort of tried to analogize it with the fledgling space program at the time. You got to start somewhere, and it doesn't always
right. Yeah, that's a good one. That's true.
In the end, it's really great. So,
yeah.
So you guys get over all the bumps of the opening, and high risk, high rewards. You guys took a lot of big risks, and it paid off because the park was super successful.
Yeah.
But then in 1991, you opened probably one of the most groundbreaking attractions. That kind of changed, the landscape of themed entertainment, in my opinion. That was Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Yes, Back to the Future. That Terry was bird dogging that, and Doug Trumbull, who was an amazing cinematographer, as we all know. And it was groundbreaking. We were so determined to one up Star Tours, and Star Tours felt like a large platform, motion based with a front window, and people on the edges got a lot of action. The people in the middle didn't get much. And then on top of that, we had the story of Back to the Future, and it just had to be a DeLorean, and you can't have a 50-passenger DeLorean. So, we schemed up the 8-passenger DeLorean, and we thought maybe the 270-degree OmniMax dome. So we went and did mock-ups in Vancouver after it was closed down, and that the filmmaking was the biggest challenge, and which took the time because it was an incredible effort to pull that off. But you're right. We're all proud of that. That was a forever moment in our industry at that time.
Yeah.
I remember at the time Tony Baxter coming into me, because I was kind of new to the industry. I'd moved from animation in '89 to theme park industry, and he said that was a great lesson in emotional connection. He said everybody who saw that movie wanted to ride in the
DeLorean. Yeah.
He goes, and Universal gave that to you.
Right.
You got to, he said, and you went into that attraction already connected emotionally to the experience. So imagine how heightened it was when you could actually sit in the DeLorean. And that was
and I thought we had a great pre-show and a great staging area before getting on the vehicle, and it was things that we weren't doing in any other attraction.
Well, and that was really the start of the IP movement. Disney had done Star Tours with Lucas, then you guys did Back to the Future, and you were more ride the movies. But now
right,
Disney
because Stephen, we didn't have all the properties of Disney, and we only had Steve Spielberg. we had Jaws and E.T. and Back to the Future. It was also the beginning of IPs, because the entire film industry looked at Universal in LA as representing all of it. So we were able to negotiate with Columbia to get the rights to Ghostbusters, for instance.
Oh, right.
That was one of the first sort of IP efforts. Fast forward that, when we were thinking about a second theme park, that also came back into play again. But what I should tell you real quickly, though, is once we got Universal on track, the land below us became available, and we started looking at a second park. And that was authored by Jay Stein before we opened our first park in June of 1990. He had already authored a memorandum to Lou and Sid. We need to be thinking about a second park. You need 2 parks to have hotels and more than a one-day stay. And,
Right.
and then we opened, it was a disaster. And, everybody thought that, it was over for all of us. But he was so, he had such a vision, and so that we picked back up on that again. And at the same time, with the success of the park, we started wanting to expand internationally. And Frank Stanek, a dear friend and mentor, joined us in the early 90s to head up international new business development and look for those opportunities. And as we got into construction on islands and the resort, I kept an overview on CityWalk and hotels and all of that, but Mark became the head creative on islands. And so it was in great hands, and I still kind of kept tabs on everything else, but I began to focus more and more on new business development with Frank. And so we led our expansion into Japan, looking at sites everywhere, ultimately Osaka. We looked at many sites in Singapore, China, Europe, all over the place. Obviously, Japan and China have happened. Singapore happened in a different way. So, being part of seeing the business grow and to be able to bring amazing people together on a collaborative team, all like-minded, that more than a handful have grown into being significant contributing senior executives in the country company today. So I'm really proud, especially Mark was one of my first hires. And and so obviously I'm prejudiced, but I'm extremely proud of him and what he's evolved and become, and very proud that perhaps I was there at the beginning of it. So kudos to Mark. It's a whole new game at Universal now.
Yeah, that's exciting. So then you moved back to LA, right, during the islands?
I did,
era?
and that's when we were doing international development. So I was really focused in LA. I was moved back in the beginning of '92. Was there in time for the earthquake.
This is when you were part of what you called the Three Amigos. Right?
Yeah, right. Frank Stanek was business. I was planning and design, and Norm Elder was our marketing and sales guy. And I got introduced to Norm, really, he was working with Jim Garber in an advertising firm. And since he had worked with Frank reached out to them to help support our international business developments with all the printed materials and all the things that we did. That ultimately led to Norm getting engaged in marketing and then becoming EVP marketing and sales for Universal Japan.
Yeah. So this is a good time around 2001 here to talk about some of the international projects you developed that never came to be. There was one you and I worked on called Motor City. That was
one of the things lots of people don't know is during the 90s, we were bought and sold 4 times, the entire
4 times.
Right.
In the early 90s, we were first sold to Matsushita. They thought it was a great idea, who owned Panasonic, hardware, software. That didn't go anywhere. They sold us to Seagram's. And it was during the Seagram's time that Luca Maddalozzo of Ferrari approached Bronfman Jr. about doing a motorsports destination. And so we spent several years developing a motorsports destination theme park, Ultimately, the site selected was Milano. But again, we were bought and sold, and this time sold to Vivendi. And so during these times, it's really hard when you're trying to really develop and launch a new project and potential joint venture partners. A lot of things got in the way, and there were a lot of great ideas that unfortunately just didn't happen due to circumstances.
Yeah.
And then ultimately we were sold to GE. And it was when GE came in, we were already well into Shanghai. Frank and I had looked at Beijing and Shanghai, and we got, they kept trying to put us out where Disney is by the train station. I kept saying no, and they finally showed us a site on the Hongkou River south of the expo site, and we jumped on it. That was the greatest site ever because it's inside the first ring road. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the inner ring road. It was downtown.
Wow.
Anyway, that blew up when GE decided not to pursue that any longer. And it was about a year after that it was unclear the future of what we would be developing. And so I decided to try it on my own at that point in time.
Yeah. So 2006, you're leaving Universal after this incredible career. And what are you doing now?
The first thing was a fellow, Mark Advent, approached me to help him he was bidding on one of the gaming licenses in Singapore, the Sentosa resort license versus the city license. And he was in all sorts of trouble and way behind schedule. He had talked to a lot of people in the industry, and they all seemed to point at me as somebody that might be able to help. And I did. It was an awesome time. It's where I got to meet Philippe Cousteau Jr., who's like my adopted son and pal today, and we've gone on to do great things together. And
Cool.
But didn't win the bid. Obviously, Genting won the bid, so that didn't go anywhere. Chased a few other things, but unfortunately, right about that same time, we had another economic downturn. So all the cool things I had in the hopper, all of a sudden went
Our
away
industry.
big time. Yeah, I mean, it was no, it went like that, and just kind of.
Yeah.
That one lasted.
Yeah.
So but over the time had some really other big options. Approached by Everland, Samsung Everland, when they thought that Universal might be coming to Korea, even though I was not at the company and neither was Frank. The company was using us to look at developing Korea. So we were very involved in planning potentially for Korea. And they were nervous about if that was going to happen. And that led to a 3.5-year engagement advising them on a $1 billion resort expansion plan. And during that time, Philippe and Anders Snow White and I developed the USA Pavilion. The theme was Oceans and Coasts at Yosu, Korea. During that same time. Have pursued a number of different activities since. I mean, right now I'm spending, the last big one was 3.5 years as the chairman of the advisory board to the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia on one of his giga projects, the Qiddiya project.
Wow.
And that was really an eye-opening experience, to say the least. And also say from personally being there and watching change happen, change is happening. The average age in the country is like 33 years old, and that's what's driving it. And so there's another side to the side we most often see. But now I'm trying to stick a little closer to home. So I am getting sucked into too many volunteer jobs. I'm actually working with the Holocaust Museum for Hope and Humanity that we hope to build here on an incredible site downtown. And we've been fortunate to joint venture with the Shoah Foundation. And so that's really turned the volume up a bit. So helping on the strategic planning and things like that. Working on a few other things of my own that aren't ready for release yet. One that we're calling Project Edison that could be pretty fantastic because it has to do with some of the new space programming that's taking place, and always looking for new adventure.
Wow.
So you're not slowing down at all. So where do you see yourself in 5 years?
If you know how our projects go, even the museum's a 4-year project. A couple of the things I'm looking at are Project Edison's usually a 5-year project. The good news is both of the museums here in Orlando and the space things over Cape Canaveral, so they're close. So the idea of maybe less international work unless something real intriguing happened, sticking closer to home and working on things that I have a lot of heart for is really my preference.
So Bob, Joe and we've now spent an entire year. You are our 12th episode. Congratulations. On the eternal search for what. Yeah, thank you. We're always looking for what makes a guest experience both timely and timeless, so that we can take this wisdom from amazing people like you and move that forward into the projects we create
and into the world.
Oh yeah, obviously into the world.
For all the people that are listening.
Yeah.
Well,
so with all of these, what do you think that is?
Well, we all have ideas about that, but I find it actually pretty simple in the end. Even though we have technology today that keeps evolving, that's become a big part of new attraction creation.
Right.
And it will continue to be. But for me, they're both timely and timeless that are about storytelling and memorable experiences. Because we have evergreen attractions, whether it be pirates or whatever it is, even ET for us at this point.
Yeah.
And there are a number of other Disney attractions that are still not high technology, but beloved by all. And parents, the kids that become parents, you got to do this. And so I hope we never get too full of ourselves to not remember that, analog and tactile are good things,
Right.
And so storytelling and memorable experiences have truly been the heartbeat of our industry. And we have more storytelling tools than ever before now. The trick now is to be careful not to let technology become the driver of those stories. It's story and experience must always be the focus. And that's where it started with Walt, hanging out with grandchildren at the merry-go-round and going, there's got to be something better than this. It has something more engaging for me. So we need to create some stories. So hopefully technology will be great. It will continue to be. But I think we could also always use some good old-fashioned analog, and some of the technologies making animation so incredible these days. So that it's not always just a digital screen of some sort.
Yeah. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. So Bob, we're pulling back into 2022, and we thank you so much for being our guest today on our time machine.
And we spent 3 hours with Bob prior to
this,
so there were so many other stories, but you did a great job.
But they'll be in your book, I'm sure.
Sure. Yes.
You got to get to work on
that is my project. I've been haunted by Buzz Price and Marty Sklar. About you got to write the book, Bob. You got to write the book.
You got to write.
Right, you got to write the book. All right.
Okay, so let's.
Well, we are going to take off. It's tax day here, so we're going to go back in time a little bit. So thank you, Bob. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you on the Spirit of the Time next month.
Been great riding with you, pals.
Thank you.
Are you stuck in time? Oh, there they go.
Oh, we hope you guys enjoyed the ride today. Thank you so much, Bob, for time traveling with us. And if you guys have any questions for Bob, please stick around for an off-the-record Q&A in just 60 seconds. So on behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we thank you for spending an hour of your day with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. Join us again next month when our passenger will be the master of slick, swing and narrative kitsch paintings that recall early 1960s advertising illustrations and bossa nova album art, the one and only Josh Agel, better known as Shag. So may your tomorrow have the nostalgia of the past, the wonder of the present, and the promise of the future. we hope you guys have a great weekend. Thanks again. Stick around for our Q&A. Oh, my video won't play. Okay, so we're just going to go to the Q&A. So.